Hey guys, welcome to the Liberal Hive Mind, a channel solely focused on exposing the abundant hypocrisy of the left. So we talk about it all the time. There's the leftist narrative, and then of course there's reality. Two concepts that tend to be quite far apart from each other, to say the least. Well, a narrative that the Democrats have been trying to push on us, basically since 2017, since the day Donald Trump was inaugurated into his first term as president. They kept droning on and on and on about the increase in hate crimes. And of course trying to pin the whole thing on Donald Trump, and in all cases, trying to pin the whole thing on, of course, white people. I tend to try to avoid getting into whole racial identity politics nonsense, but when you have the leftist hive mind constantly going on about how evil and terrible and deplorable white people are and you're a white person, well, it kinda matters. And it's kind of frustrating when you're facing endless slanderous attacks. I mean, we all know the narrative from 2016 all the way to 2020 when Donald Trump was calling the virus the China virus, rightfully so. The media kept parroting the same talking point that Donald Trump, and of course by extension his white extremist MAGA domestic terrorist voters, were at the nucleus of this supposed rise in hate crimes.
The president's language, his rhetoric, has produced the kinds of hate crimes that we saw in El Paso yesterday, but we've been seeing across this country. They've been on the rise for each one of the last 3 years. So
it's happening because we didn't have leadership at the top, starting from President Trump calling it the China virus and the Kung flu and all of that, which apparently it unleashed this kind of targeted hate crimes against Asian Americans. And the increase is dramatic.
Today, we find that there have been nearly 3,800 anti-Asian hate crimes and incidents in just the year alone. They were stoked by the words of former President Donald Trump.
An atmosphere of hate has been developing in this country over the last few years. A lot of it is emanating from Washington, and it's having an effect on all of us.
Wait, so you're saying you're blaming the president by saying
not
it's coming
just
from
the president.
Washington?
I'm saying, but we have to be clear. We need a different tone starting in Washington, which we had, by the way, with Democrats and Republicans both in the White House, that encouraged this country to actually find some unity and some common ground. We haven't had that for the last few years.
Well, once again, if lefties want to play this identity politics game, well then you better have the receipts. You better bring to the table actual facts. If you're going to blame conservative white males for the uptick, and especially recently with all the quote anti-Semitism rhetoric targeting the MAGA base, if you're going to claim that supposed racist white conservatives are at the core of all of this anti-Semitism, you better bring the data. Well, of course, as it turns out, the media narrative, the leftist narrative, the Twitter narrative, whatever the hell you want to call it, it's all the same damn thing, is completely incorrect. In fact, the real numbers are going to shock you. Dov Hickend on Twitter writes, "New hate crimes report by Americans AA in Israel bitten finally confirms what we've known anecdotally. 94% of anti-Jewish assaults in New York City from 2018 to 2022 were against Orthodox Jews. And 97%, of course, 97% of these hate crimes targeting Jewish people were perpetrated by other minorities." For the full report, watch this clip. So let's take a look. Now let's just get this little screen grab right over here with the pie chart, because it basically tells you all that you need to know. Perpetrator group identities were documented in 99 assaults. 97% of anti-Jewish assaults were committed by other minorities. 69% Black, 17% Asian Muslim Arab, 11% Hispanic, and that tiny little sliver right over there, 3% white. These leftoids continue to go on about anti-Semitism this, anti-Semitism that. They're always going back to the exact same example of Charlottesville, which of course was an absolutely despicable display, but that display was such an extreme fringe minority that got the whole spotlight. The media amplified it and put a magnifying glass on it and just kept running with that same narrative from 2017 all the way till present day. The actual reality is that whites, at least in New York City data, are responsible for 3% of the violent hate crimes against the Jewish community. 3%. And that data is even more significant considering that white people account for the majority of the American population. There's more white people than any other racial group in America. Yet despite there being more white people, they account for a tiny fraction of the hate crimes. And we've known this anecdotally, as Mr. Dov Hicken wrote in his tweet. Because of course we've seen it. It's not just in New York City. We've seen all over the nation a massive spike in hate crimes, mainly against Jewish Americans and Asian Americans. And almost none of these instances, especially the violent instances, was the perpetrator a white male. Yet the media continues to run with this absolutely phony, gaslighting, slanderous narrative that it's all Donald Trump's fault. It's all the white MAGA supporter, insurrectionist extremist that's at the core of this rise in hate crime. I always go back to this same article when we talk about this topic, this fascinating study. Hate crime hoaxes are more common than you think. A political scientist found that fewer than 1 in 3 of 346 such allegations were genuine. Less than 1/3 of hate crimes reported are actually genuine. Most of them are hoaxes. And in almost all of the major supposed hate crimes involving MAGA Trump extremists, all the ones that the media is constantly publicizing and shoving in your face, almost all of them, nearly every single one of them, frankly, honestly, I think it's literally every single one of the high-profile cases that have been promoted by the media have been total hoaxes, from Juicy Smollett to Bubba Wallace, to the various different situations that we've seen happen on college campuses or in high schools, where something's graffitied onto a wall or someone has their dreadlocks snipped off or pulled. In almost every single one of these situations, it ends up being a hoax where the perpetrator of said act is actually a person of color, or it's a person of color doing it to themselves and then blaming white people at large. It's another totally fabricated nonsense propaganda element that is used by the media to continue to divide us, to create a narrative or a dichotomy, a dynamic of victim and victimizer, or oppressed and oppressor. And of course, the oppressor is always the white man, always the white man, the white man. But as we see based on the data, based on analysis, it seems as though the white man is the least violent, responsible for the least amount of hate crimes. Seems as though the white man, who gets all the bad rep of being the most racist and bigoted, the most oppressive, is the least racist, the least bigoted, and the least oppressive. You know, here's a great example. Black Lives Matter told us for years that the biggest problem in America when it comes to race is the white man, the violent white man. You know, here's the perfect graphic. 2013 FBI crime report expanded homicide data table, and for the most part, year over year, the data stays the same. This is what Black Lives Matter is protesting. This is what BLM tells you is the problem. Black Americans killed by white Americans. But it's absolutely the smallest problem. White people kill white people at more than 10 times the rate. Not to mention black on black violence, yet the narrative is always that white people are the problem. White people are the problem. It's meant to divide. It's meant to cause further animosity between races in American society, because that's what gives the elite ruling political class their power, their ability to retain power, their ability to win elections based on emotional rhetoric. But it's simply not true. The narratives are total bogus garbage. Yet we see it across the board. Same identity politics and victim politics. Here's a great example. If black people had rioted on January 6th at the Capitol, there would have been a vastly different law enforcement response, House Sergeant at Arms says. Give me a break. First of all, we're going to pretend as if the 2020 summer of riots didn't happen. All the BLM riots across the nation. You know, riots, arson, assaults, homicides that were essentially allowed to happen. Meanwhile, we're going to pretend like the whole Ashley Babbitt situation never occurred. Give me a break. Could you imagine if Ashley Babbitt was any other race and that occurred during the 2020 summer of riots? It would be an outrage. It's the same bogus racial narrative recycled over and over again, but the simple fact of the matter is, it's just not true. It's an emotional weapon used by the powerful ruling class to maintain their grasp of power. Wake up, Neo. You're living in the Matrix. That's what I got for you guys. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, make sure to leave a like and possibly subscribe to the channel if you guys are up for it. I'm gonna get out of here. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.